In this video, property taxes in Mexico, an essential topic for anyone who owns or is thinking about owning property in Mexico. Property taxes in Mexico are often a pleasant surprise for newcomers because they tend to be much lower than what many people pay in other countries. But there are still things that you should know, like how property taxes work, how they're calculated, and when to pay them. So let's break it all down. And by the way, it is going to be a breath of fresh air compared to property taxes in the US and Canada. Anyway, so first things first, property taxes in Mexico are known as predial, Predial, predial. Predial is an annual tax that property owners pay to their local municipality. It's used to fund local infrastructure, public services, and other municipal projects. The good news is that property taxes in Mexico are generally very affordable compared to many other countries, especially the US or Canada. But the exact amount you'll pay depends on a few key factors. So let's talk about how are property taxes calculated in Mexico. The amount of property tax you owe is based on the assessed value of the property. This assessed value is determined by the local government, and it's typically much lower than the market value of the property. So here's how it works. Number one, the assessed value, the government assigns a value to your property based on factors like size, location, and construction quality. And then number two is the tax rate. So each municipality sets its own tax rate, which is usually a fraction of a percent, often ranging from 0.1 to 0.4% of the assessed value. So you have to check at a municipality level what it's going to be. So for example, if your property's assessed value is 1,000,000 pesos and your local tax rate is 0.2%, your annual property tax would be just 2,000 pesos, which is like $100. It's worth noting that these rates can vary significantly depending on the city or the region. So how and when do you pay property taxes in Mexico? Property taxes are typically due once a year, usually in January or February. Some municipalities offer discounts if you pay early, often up to 15 to 20%. You can pay your property taxes at the local municipal office. Sometimes you can do it online with a digital payment option, and also at banks or convenience stores. And then just make sure you keep your payment receipt. It's important for proving you've paid your taxes if you decide to sell the property later on. So always document very well that all your taxes are paid for, because it's a very crucial part of the process of selling a property, is making sure that the taxes are up to date. So what happens if you don't pay your property taxes? What happens if you miss the deadline for paying your predial? Well, you'll face interest, you'll face penalties and interest charges. And while these fees aren't usually extreme, it can add up over time. Additionally, unpaid property taxes could complicate things if you decide to sell the property or transfer ownership, as you'll need to clear any outstanding taxes before completing the transaction. And on the flip side of the coin, if you're watching this video because you're interested in buying a property in Mexico, part of the process that the notaries usually take care of is making sure that the taxes are up to date, or if they're not, kind of identifying how many years of back taxes are owed and making sure that that's kind of included in the negotiation process when you buy a house. Now let's look at some additional taxes to consider when owning property in Mexico. So aside from predial, there are a couple other taxes you might encounter as a property owner. One is the capital gains tax, called the ISR. So if you sell your property, you may need to pay capital gains tax on the profit. This tax is generally 35% of the net gain, but there are ways to reduce it, like using the primary residence exemption or providing proof of renovations and improvements. Okay, so renovations and improvements can lower the net gain, and that's a way to lower your capital gains tax. Number two, another additional tax is the acquisition tax, which is called the Impuesto sobre Adquisición de Inmuebles. So when you buy property in Mexico, you'll pay an acquisition tax. This is typically 2 to 4% of the purchase price or assessed value, depending on the state. Then another tax is the rental income tax. If you rent out your property, you'll need to pay taxes on the rental income. This applies to both long-term and vacation rentals. And by the way, I have a few videos on the channel about Airbnb taxes for Americans and in Mexico. Okay, so how do property taxes compare to other countries? You might be curious. So one of the reasons Mexico is so attractive to expats and investors is its low property taxes. So in the US or Canada, property tax rates can range from 1% to 3% of the property's market value annually, which adds up super quickly. I mean, you think about $1 million property, which is low in a lot of areas of Canada and the US these days, and you're already paying 10 grand a year. And that's every single year. That means $100,000 a decade of property tax on $1 million property. If you have a $2 million property, and that's just talking 1%, and it's often much higher than that in the US. So property taxes in the US and Canada, if you're watching this video, you probably know they're absurdly high. It's like robbery. And so in Mexico, even luxurious homes often have an annual property tax that's just a few $100 a year. It's a fraction of what you're paying in the US and Canada. However, it's important to remember that while property taxes are low, some other costs like closing costs or maintenance fees might be higher than you're used to. Closing costs aren't too bad. You're maybe looking at like 5 to 7% closing costs when you include the acquisition cost as well as the notary costs. Maintenance fees, I would say maintenance is obviously much lower in Mexico because just labor is so much cheaper if you need someone to paint the house or, new roof and this kind of thing. Overall, of course, cost of property ownership in Mexico is just going to be a fraction of what you might be used to in the US or Canada. Okay, moving on to some tips for managing property taxes in Mexico. So here are some practical tips to help you stay on top of your property taxes. So one is pay early. Take advantage of early payment discounts in January, February. Number 2 is stay organized and keep records of all payments and receipts. Number 3 is use a local notary or lawyer. If you're unsure about property tax obligations, a local notary or lawyer can provide assistance. And number 4 is verify the assessed value. Sometimes the assessed value may seem off, so check with the municipality to ensure it's accurate. So some closing thoughts to recap. Property taxes in Mexico, the predial, are low compared to many other countries, but they're still a legal obligation. Make sure you pay it on time every year to avoid penalties. And if you're buying property, budget for additional taxes like acquisition tax, and potential capital gains tax if you sell in the future. Owning property in Mexico can be a fantastic investment, but understanding the tax system is key to avoiding surprises. Thanks for watching. If you found this video helpful, give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more tips on property ownership, taxes, and expat living. By the way, MyLatinLife, we're a full-scale immigration firm. We can help you relocate to Mexico or anywhere in Latin America. We can help you get you residency in Mexico for your entire family and put residency cards in your hands, which you might be interested in as well. There's a link in the description to book a call with us to help you with all aspects of relocation and expat living. Drop a comment below too if you have any questions or want to share your experience with property taxes in Mexico. Until next time, take care and happy property ownership.